Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Midnight Book Club. We're your hosts, Lucy
An angel?
and Angel.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Now, first, we're going to do a non spoilery thoughts in sections like that, and then we'll move on to more in depth thoughts with spoilers and the like. So, first, maybe we'll do a little summary of what the book is, give a little bit of the story. So this book is an adult vampire and werewolf paranormal romance. It's actually Ali Hazelwood's first paranormal romance book so far. All of her other books have been all contemporary adult romances. In this modern day world, vampires, werewolves, and humans are constantly in a political tension and constantly about to go to war. Shocking. War is everywhere. Our main character, Misery Lark, is the daughter of a powerful vampire councilman. And after a human and vampire alliance falls apart, her father and the rest of the vampire council decide they need to form a different alliance with the werewolves. And they do that through an arranged marriage. So our dear Misery is to be married to the alpha of one of the biggest packs in the country, Low Moorland. Misery has her own reasons to agreeing for this marriage, even at the risk of her own safety, but she'll do anything to get what she needs back. So that's a summary. And now we can go into some non-spoilery thoughts. Ether, you. Oh, I keep calling you Ether.
I mean, it's fine either way. Um, I this is a book where you go into the book knowing that this is not going to be like a serious read. And I think anybody who does try to go into this book with that thought is not gonna like have a great time. There is plot. The book has plot, right? So it's not just a smut or whatever. There is something going on. But it's definitely not like the most well developed plot. It's not like the best writing I've ever read in the world, but it is a simple, silly paranormal romance read. And I feel like that's what
Yeah,
it's advertising itself as. Um,
yeah. This is a book you don't need to go into like thinking really hard and analyzing and like really looking into like the actual political tensions that's going on. You don't need to think that hard. And if you try to, you're not gonna have a good time. You're gonna be very frustrated. This book is meant to be silly and just there for fun, goofy times with a little bit of plot sprinkled in. It's not meant to be really like analytical and in depth with it, which I feel is pretty accurate to like a paranormal kind of romance, especially considering Ali Hazelwood's previous books. I personally haven't read all of them yet. Maybe I will. We'll see. But it fits her. It fits her as from I can tell from interviews of her and things of that sort. God. um. So yeah, you're just meant to have a good time. It's meant to be just silly and goofy. A quick read if you're a fast reader. There's nothing crazy new and outrageous in terms of like the literary world, but that's not really what this book is for. So that's okay. We don't need big crazy prose and make you analytically think about everything. This is a fun book for fun. And we like that. We like
this
fun.
is the silly werewolf book. It doesn't need to be doing all that for real.
No.
um,
It doesn't need to be all in depth. We're here for
yeah.
werewolves and vampires.
So in the book, our main female character, is Misery Lark. The fucking name, the naming conventions in this book, everybody has a regular name except for Misery. Um, like Misery has a brother named Owen. Why is he named Owen and she got stuck with Misery? We may never know. Um, uh, our main male love interest is Lo Moreland. Um, again, fairly regular ass name. But Misery is she's kind of a girl boss queen. Okay, here's my thing with Misery. Sometimes she is so smart and witty and like silly. I love her. And then sometimes her head is full of rocks and I have to be like, you're driving me a little bit insane. Actually, actually this is a little
Yeah,
upsetting with how dense she can be
brain
about certain
cells are
things.
there.
Um as for Lo, who is our main male love interest, he, for the most part, I like his character. They're both a little trope. The book as a whole is tropey, and I will get into that. But Lo is very tropey for the type of character he is. He's supposed to be alpha werewolf. He's kind of domineering and um all that. And I think the vibe is supposed to be like he's cold to everyone else except for like two characters. Um, and then like, as we go, we see that maybe that's not the case. Um, for the most part, I like Low. There are moments where again, I'm like, you have rocks in your brain. Actually, like there's no fucking brain cells in there because what is wrong with you? Sometimes and maybe this is the case just with all romance books, and I don't read enough like straight romance because I read a lot of like high fantasy with like a side of romance. Um, but like sometimes I'm just like, y'all are dumber than a bag of rocks together. You don't have a brain cell to rub together between the two of you. What is going on? But like
Misery
they're
and Low specifically feel
Mhm.
like they fucking switch the brain cell back and forth. Somebody's holding it, the other one's not throughout this book.
Exactly. And they have okay, so they do have good chemistry, I would say. It doesn't feel like super forced. It doesn't feel like weird because I know that can be an issue sometimes. Um, and they do have good dialogue together, and they are likable. I think sometimes you can read a book like this, and especially the female love interest can come off kind of like basically like pick me ish. I don't think Misery comes off that way despite some of the way her character is framed. Where she like, has never had a lot of friends, and she's like this high ranking vampire technically. She's like even in the book's blurb on the back it talks about how she's an outcast and all this stuff. And I think it could have been so easy for her to fall into like pick me territory. But she doesn't come off that way. Like she comes off as like genuine and um like very aware of herself as far as like why she's different from other people, and how part of that is her own fault by her own admission. um so I like the main characters. I think they're great. They do what they need to do. They're a little stupid sometimes, but unfortunately I think that is just the way of romance books. We gotta
Yeah,
we
it's
gotta
just the
generate
way.
conflict somehow.
If everybody was intelligent, everything would go smoothly, and we need problems somewhere. That's how you make good conflict. Yeah, I agree. I think Misery is a pretty good main character, especially since this book is majority first person. We're seeing all of this through her eyes and we're in her head the whole time. So her commentary and dialogue is enjoyable and funny, and she's got a lot of snarky like attitude and wit to her, which is really really nice. And her backstory and why she is the way she is, I feel is pretty compelling. Sometimes I do wish she would get out of her own head for 5 minutes. It's
That
okay,
part.
Misery, I swear. But I agree completely on the pick me thing. She could have turned into a very insufferable pick me, um, damsel in distress, not doing anything. Like, she could have been very annoying. But I think Ali Hazelwood did a really good job in making her not that. She made her into a pretty likable person. and that's pretty nice to see, because romance, from everything I've seen, it's very you're gonna like the main character or you're probably not going to. And I'm glad we fell into that we're gonna like her, in this one at least. And Lo as a love interest, like you said, is very tropey. He's the tropiest guy. But he shows a lot of, like not a lot of, like, different sides to him, but you can tell he's putting on the domineering act for a reason. But he's got a lot of, like, softness under that, and you definitely see it with him and Misery as this book goes. Their banter is so cute sometimes. It's so silly. They're very goofy together, especially as he learns to open up more to her. This is an arranged marriage, so at first they're not like they don't know each other. This wedding's first time they're meeting. And as their relationship and like their friendship kind of grows through the book, it's nice to finally see them start to care about each other in the ways that they do. It's very sweet. And they have a lot of really cute little fluffy scenes together that are absolutely adorable. And Lo interacting with all of the other characters that are involved with his pack, all the other werewolves, is really nice to see. He gives a good leadership role, and you can tell he commands a lot of respect. Everybody around him clearly respects him, and from what we learn, he's absolutely earned it. Um, and so that's really nice because he could have been the like classic complete and total asshole to everyone around him, um, like kind of alpha werewolf type,
Mhm.
but he's not. He gives a very good leadership, like kindness to those around him. I like that.
Yeah, I think definitely he while there is like a lot of tropey stuff, there is like some subversion, and I think we get that a little bit with Lo because like typically in a werewolf I honestly was going in expecting a lot more like um ooh, what is the word I'm thinking of? I would have expected a lot more possessiveness from him. And we do see that
Mhm,
kind
yeah.
of, but it is manifested in a way that doesn't feel weird or like this is too much or like oh you're being creepy or whatever. Um I think part of what helps that is that the way the book is written, there is like a little blurb or like paragraph or line at the beginning of each chapter that is clearly from Lo's perspective. And I think that kind of helps in some of his behaviors, like rationalizing them so it doesn't feel as weird. But he also doesn't have a ton of those behaviors to begin with, which honestly is probably the better way to go. Because it is such a trope of like I'm gonna take what I want anyway, and you're mine regardless of what you want, and nobody else is allowed to touch you, and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So there is like some possessiveness, especially in the back half of the book, but at the same time, there is like a level of Lo wanting to not allow, but Lo is wanting Misery to maintain her own autonomy. Um, in throughout a lot of the book, which I appreciate. I think there's again, especially because this is Ali Hazelwood's first like foray into paranormal romance. I think a lot could have gone wrong in the way she approached it. I'm not saying she approached it perfectly, and I'm sure we will get to that, but I think she did a fairly good job considering this is her first paranormal romance book.
Absolutely. Heavy agree. She in terms of like the I wouldn't call it magic or some like the paranormal world building in terms she got pretty creative. There were little bumps in the road that we'll talk more in depth about, but she was pretty creative in like the vampires and werewolves and all of that, which I really appreciated. She did something on like vampires and werewolves that I haven't really seen before in vampire werewolf media. Um, and I respect that. I like when there's new creativity in a kind of genre in a space that has been around for so long and has had everything go on that you could possibly imagine. And maybe she isn't the first to do what she's done with this genre, but it's the first that I've seen. So I appreciate it, and that's what matters. Um, Also, if you are a fan of Ali Hazelwood, her and the STEM aspect of her books remains true here as well. Even though this is a vampire werewolf paranormal romance, STEM is still involved. So if you like that, women in STEM, it's still here. It's still very much here. And I I appreciate it. I do. I think it gives the characters something to do. It gives um like a semblance of this character has a purpose in whatever is going on that involves the STEM. It doesn't feel like it's just there to be there. It feels like it helps conflict resolution and like problem solving and everything
Yeah,
like that.
it is like used. Like they don't just like say it and then don't use it. And I think also it helps add depth to the characters that it pertains to specifically. Because otherwise uh, like with Misery, if she didn't have it, she would feel very like woe is me, damsel in distress, which is clearly not what her character is supposed to be. So I think for her, it helps with that aspect, and with the other characters that are like it pertains to, it either helps with conflict resolution or it kind of explains why they're there. Like what are you doing here, you know? Um Specifically with Alex, right? Because like if that wasn't the case, him being there wouldn't make a ton of sense, I feel like. But because that and his relationship with Misery wouldn't make sense. Um, and by relationship I mean his friendship with Misery. Wouldn't make a lot of sense, but because of like a shared interest and like the we're seeing this interest in action, I think it helps with like, okay, this is why this character is here, this is what they're doing, like, you know, all of this makes sense. So it's not just like shoehorned in there. I feel like there's reasons for it, and it's used in a plot like pushing way. Like it helps to push the plot.
Absolutely. Like I appreciate that it gives these characters a purpose and things to do instead of just sit around and wait for somebody else to solve the problem. They're active in helping and in trying to figure things out. I like that because if Misery just had to sit around this entire book and had nothing to do, I absolutely would not have enjoyed it as much as I did. And also, I think Ali's writing genuinely feels like a fun little like rom-com kind of way. It's very simple and digestible for a wider audience, which is I feel like the whole point and purpose of her kind of style of books. And that's good. It's not a bad thing at all. Sometimes you don't need anything like big and crazy. Sometimes you want a little silly, goofy book that you can be done with in like a day or two and have a good time.
Yeah. The writing, okay, the thing with the writing though is that sometimes because of the political aspect of the plot, sometimes it felt like, okay, suddenly we're being serious in this silly goofy book, and the tone shifts can be a little bit jarring sometimes. I think they're handled well for the most part, but there is occasions where it's like suddenly we're like in the seriousness and Misery is over here cracking jokes or making fucking wise ass comments. Or
Yeah.
they're in the middle of like, you know, going into enemy territory, but they gotta stop and like screw around, you know? Sometimes there's like some weird tone stuff, but for the most part, I think it's good and I think it works for the book. But I do think that this is supposed to be like an accessible book into paranormal romance and into that like this genre that is like a short, quick read. I say that, but this book is like almost 400 pages, but like you can definitely get through it in like a day. Um, and it is like not there's not a whole lot that you have to like know going into it. Um so I think in that aspect, and I'm assuming this is part of her goal, was to make this accessible because obviously this is her first paranormal romance books and she's gonna want longtime readers to read it. So it makes sense to me that it's like short, quick, accessible, kind of silly, with like the hint of a plot. You know, that feels
Yeah,
like that makes sense to me.
yeah, very easy peasy. Um, Even though this book is nearly 400 pages, I promise you it doesn't feel like that. This book is so fast paced.
Oh yeah, it
It's
just they're
sometimes
just
it's a
fucking
little much.
zooming.
They are zooming. I would love to know timeline of events. Like by the time Misery marries Low to where the book ends, I would love to know that timeline because it can't be more than like like a month, a couple of
I
months.
think it's a
It
couple of
cannot be
months.
that long.
I think she taught like sometimes there are time skips that happen where Misery will be like, now it's a week later or whatever. She was also like down for the count for a little bit. Um and like from the beginning of the book, so that we get a prologue of the wedding, of them getting married. And then when we get to the actual first chapter, we cut back 6 weeks prior. So she was aware of the wedding for at least a month, and then everything else that happens within it. A generous guess would be from the time they get married to the end of the book, 4 months is my generous guess. Um,
Yeah, that is so fast.
but yeah,
So
this
fast.
does go real quick. Um, it's I don't know what else to say. Yes, it goes really it goes quickly.
It goes super fast. Genuinely, and this might be a little bit of a hot take. I rarely ever say this personally, but I think this book could have been longer. Not by much, but like maybe a chapter or two, maybe three. I think it could have given Allie um a lot more room to maybe let some of the political tension breathe or let some of the conflict that comes up breathe a little bit more and give more like details into certain things, answer a couple of questions that kind of get glossed over in all of the madness. I think also if it had more time, it would have maybe those like tonal shifts of really serious to randomly goofy and playful could have been a little easier and a little bit more smooth in terms of it. Um, I rarely ever say that a book needs to be longer. Most of the time, I'm talking about how a book needs to be shorter. But this one, I think she could have gone a little bit more. But most of her books, from what I've seen, are about the same length. None are too crazy big, but none of them are too crazy short. So I think she just wanted to like keep consistency and do what she does best
Yeah. I
and
also think
keep
like
it length.
part of that might be like there is world building in this book. There's not a ton of it, and I think part of like extra pages could have gone towards some of the world building and like building out relationships between some of the side characters and the main characters. Just to get a better idea of like why things are the way they are. But
For sure.
I think that maybe part of that is because all of her other books are contemporary romance, where like you don't need to really world build. Like to some degree you do because you have to like introduce these characters and all this. But like it's just the regular world, you know? It's not like you're not having to develop a political system or, two new races and how they operate and all this stuff. So I think maybe part of the what leaves you feeling like you want a little bit more might have to do with the world building aspect. But I do think you're right. I do think she probably wanted to keep consistent with the length of her other books. Um, Again, I think she wanted like her already longtime readers to pick this up and read it. And I think to appeal to them, she probably had to keep it close to the same length. But I think I agree this book could have benefited from like an extra 100, 200 pages. And it would have felt
Yeah.
more fleshed out and a little more complete.
Yeah, the pacing would have been a little bit nicer, maybe just a touch slower, 'cause dear God, breakneck speed, nonstop. I mean, I couldn't put this book down in, like, the 2 days it took me to finish it because it was so one after the other, "We're going, we're going, we're going." So, she could have slowed down just a hair, just a touch. We could have taken some time, smelled the flowers a little bit, looked around, but I completely understand why she wanted to keep it, like, the same length as her other ones. Absolutely. And on the note of making this accessible to everybody, the internet is making this book out to be an Omegaverse kind of book. I promise you, in reality, it is not. Don't let those people scare you into reading, like away from reading this book because of that, like, Omegaverse thing. It's not that. It is not that. It's not. It's just a regular werewolf romance. No Omegaverse, anything of the sort here. So if you like just regular old werewolf stuff, you'll be okay here. For the most
Yeah,
part, I
they're
think.
for the most part, yeah. I don't know who said that this because even like on I'm looking at the Goodreads for this book. Like it is nowhere, in my opinion, it is nowhere implied that that this is an Omegaverse book. Um like
I don't know what TikTok was doing, what the internet was
I don't
doing.
know if people heard werewolf and like alpha werewolf and like assumed. But like newsflash, not all werewolf media is ABO media. They are two
Nope,
distinct
nope.
concepts that sometimes overlap. But like there's one aspect that you see with ABO that gets carried over to this book and nothing else. So I personally would not consider this to be ABO. A lot of people are complaining, people who read her normal content that like, oh, it's a monster fucker book. Disagree. It really is not. Honestly, it's kind of tame. The book is a little bit tame. I think people are just
Absolutely.
I think it's just that her audience that she normally has is not used to any kind of like deviation. And so the deviation that we get maybe is a little bit off-putting, or not off-putting, but a little bit like different for them. But like for us and for like other things that I've read, this is really not like anything crazy in my opinion.
Yeah, you there are things on, like, fan fiction websites that are much more, like, wild and crazy than this book, and those are actually Omegaverse things. So, this book is really just a werewolf romance. There's, like, one thing that we will get into, um, in terms of, like, the smut and the adult content that happens in this book that is very much probably jarring for people who are not well versed in, like, the fan fiction world or the kind of like monster fucker book genre. And I completely understand if that might be a little much or maybe a little off-putting to those people. I don't blame them at all. It can be a little crazy. It can be a little crazy to read that for the first time. A little funky. But it's genuinely not an Omegaverse thing. I think somebody lied several times. The internet was spreading misinformation as it is one to do. Um, so don't let TikTok or the internet or anybody else lie to you in that manner. It's just werewolf. It's just werewolf romance. It's just a good time. That's all that matters. Also, this book, I need everybody to know this book has a lot of modern joking and modern terms used in it, and for some people that might take you out of it. It might really like ruin your experience maybe. For some people it's really funny. And I'm one of the people that thought it was really funny. It did take me out for a second and I had to like remember where I was, but the jokes that are used are very like a specific breed of maybe millennial kind of going towards Gen Z humor. And sometimes you're like, wow, there's no way that I just read that in this book. There's no way she just said that to me.
I think
And she did.
I think it's because like like I think because of the arranged marriage part of it and the fact that it's vampires and werewolves, your brain kind of for me, I was like, okay, it's gonna be like a high fantasy romance, which it's not. It is contemporary fantasy, which means that it is taking place in the present day time. And
Yeah.
so when it first and it but it doesn't feel that way for most of the book. For at least the beginning part of the book. Towards the back half, okay, it starts to be like, okay, we're talking about electronics a lot more. But at the beginning, it feels, and with the prologue, it all feels very like this is a high fantasy romance. And then you get to like some lines in the first part of the book, and it's like, oh, this is like set now. Like this is like a set in recent times. Like they have cell phones and shit. And so then
Yeah.
when it comes to some of the language that is used, our main character is using popular internet slang, um, and like, speaking in that way, and it is a little jarring, especially like the first couple times it happens, because you have to kind of remind yourself that this is a book happening in like a contemporary context. Like this is supposed to be the essentially the world now, just if there was vampires and werewolves.
Yeah.
There's like they make some jokes about like the humans that are feel very topical, and it's like this feels super out of place, but the idea I think is supposed to be this is just our world if also there was vampires and werewolves.
Yeah. So you gotta know that going in, and you might have to continuously remind yourself until you get really in it, like about like maybe 25% in, you'll probably like remember it and it'll be stuck in your head that yes, this is a modern day time period. So but when you first get in, you might have to like really remind yourself a lot of like, this is modern day, this is why these jokes are here, this is why this thing's there, phones, things like that, like modern day tech. It's all in there. So you either go in knowing that and being like absolutely firm in that, or you have to remind yourself until it really sticks in your head. But once it sticks, it's fine and it doesn't feel so jarring. But at first, it really was like, oh, that's there? A phone? We have phones here. What? Confusion. But then you're fine. You're fine after a little bit. It's very, very funny. The internet slang and humor that Misery especially uses is sometimes so like whiplash, but also incredibly funny because it's very much she didn't just say that, and then you reread it. She did in fact, and she'll say more. She'll keep going.
This
And
is
I have to
true.
respect Misery for that.
Sometimes misery just keeps going, and you're like, please, can you stop now? Can we? I need to breathe.
I need you to come back down to earth, Misery. We need to get back in the moment, please, baby. I
Yeah. There
There's a
are
lot going on.
there are points where I'm like, I misery, you really should stop talking
You gotta stop for 5 minutes, Misery. Get out of your own head. Shut that mouth.
now.
You'll be okay.
For real.
It's all right.
I definitely okay, so I think I'm gonna give my unspoiler. I'm not gonna explain it yet. My rating of the book. You should give your rating, and then we can talk about some more in-depth stuff with the book. Um, I out of 5 would give this book a 3.5. Um, and I'm not gonna explain right now. I will explain at the end why I would give it that score. But without spoilers, without explaining super in depth as to why, I would give this book a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I think I would give it the same, like a 3.5. It's especially for me, I'm not a romance person. I don't read a lot of romance. Um, it's never really been my genre of choice. So, I just think it was a fun, silly time, and I had a good time reading it. Um, so yeah, I think I agree. I'd give it a 3.5 out of 5 for sure. Um, Makes sense to me.
Okay.
So now
Now we can get
it's spoiler
yeah,
time.
now we can get fucking into the plot, the actual plot of the book. Um
Yeah, it's spoiler time. If you want to read it, haven't read it yet, leave. Get
yeah,
out of
this is
here.
your
Go read
chance.
it. You have
um
one warning and one warning only.
so in depth, the book is about Misery looking for her friend who has gone missing. This is like her friend since childhood, pretty much her only friend who randomly up and disappeared. She doesn't know where she is. Um, but she thinks that maybe the best friend's name is Serena. She thinks that maybe she has ended up in werewolf territory, and that's why she agrees to go through with this wedding, even though she does not really want
Yeah,
to. Um,
yeah.
she
That's her whole thing of like that's her own reasoning,
yes,
even
and
though she's disregarding her own safety.
that is her main motivation for pretty much anything she does throughout the book, especially the first half. Is just she needs to find this her friend, so she's willing to make alliances with the wares, and this is part of why she ends up developing more of a relationship with Lo because she thinks Lo can help her with his resources. And we do know so that's Misery's motivations. Um, at some point, it becomes known that so Lo has a little sister. We're introduced to her very early on. Her name is Anna. She's very cute, whatever. I like the dynamic she has with Misery. Misery, this is what I meant when I said that Misery had the potential to run into pick me territory because a lot of Misery's internal characterization of herself at the beginning of the book is that she's a cold-hearted bitch and she doesn't care about anyone except for like herself and Serena. And she, she goes to work, she comes home, she doesn't really invest time in anything. Um, she has like a computer science degree or whatever. But like other than that, like she doesn't care about other people necessarily for the most part. And this is how she characterizes herself as this like cold-hearted, I don't care about anyone. And part of that we know has to do with the fact that she's a vampire and she feels like she's predisposed to that kind of feeling. Um, but I do think that that could have very easily slipped into pick me, I'm not like everyone else territory. But I think because the catalyst for Serena going missing is a fight that the two of them have, and we know that in within this fight that Serena tells Misery that she needs Misery to care about one goddamn thing that isn't her or something along those lines. And I think that helps kind of keep Misery grounded and not slip into that because she is so aware of the fact that like her life is kind of not the best and she might present herself as this cold-hearted person, but she does still care at least about Serena, and Serena is right, and she needs to start caring about other things. Um, as far as Misery's characterization, that's why I said that. Um, Plot-wise, I think that the political parts of it were could have been more fleshed out. All we really know is that the vampires and the humans would swap children. They would swap one child per group every 10 years or something. Um, to
I think so. I
basically,
think it starts. I believe they said it started when like Misery had to go when she was 8. Misery is one of those kids that had to get swapped.
mhm.
Her dad likes selling her out. We'll just say that. Mr. Lark loves selling Misery out. Fuck that guy. Anyway. But Misery was 8 when she went, and I believe she was done when she was 18. So something like that, about that age range, um, is when they call them the collaterals. They age out. Then there's a new one. It goes on and on. But yeah, the political tension in terms of that could have been fleshed out a little bit more. I would have liked to see a little bit more of the history behind why, like, the vampires and the wares and the humans are all so at odds. Um, I'm sure it's probably just, like, why any, like, group of people is at odds. It's just because somebody's mad that someone has more power or whatever. But I would have liked to probably see a little bit more of, like, backstory, history, because it's brought up multiple times that there are resources that, like, books, stuff online, whatever, where you can read and find out more about certain things. It's brought up multiple times, but it's never really utilized.
Yeah, we like
I wish it was.
all we really know is that the collateral program between the vampires and the humans has been going on for a while and was primarily developed because of a political figure at the time. And this political figure at the beginning of the book is now being voted out of office. So now the vampires are scrambling to try and come up with something else because the new person going into this office is more aligned with the wares. So this is why the vampires are scrambling to form some kind of alliance with the wares so that they're not being outnumbered by humans and wares. Um,
Yeah.
we do know some history about there have previously been weddings between vampires and wares for political reasons, but that there was one several years ago that ended terribly because the wares supposedly betrayed the vampires um and basically ambushed them at this arranged wedding. Um and like that's kind of all we get as far as like
Yeah.
historically why things are the way they are. What I find interesting is somehow they don't know anything about each other, like anatomically, or like culturally. Like you would think that because you guys are like mortal enemies, that you would know something. But like when Misery gets to the house, because Lo lives in a big house, but like all the other werewolves kind of come and go. But when they bring her there, like nobody really knows what to do with her. Like there's no like they don't understand her sleep schedule, they don't understand like her eating habits. You know, it's very clear that they don't know anything and it goes the other way too. Like Misery doesn't know anything about the wares, she doesn't know their eating habits, she doesn't know their sleeping habits. She doesn't know anything other than they're strong and they hate me. Um and then even then on the human side, so a big plot point of the book is that Lo's little sister is a human were hybrid, which previously was thought to not be possible. And so at one point she gets sick. She gets like the flu and they don't know what the fuck
Yeah,
to
she has, like, a
do.
cold or
Right.
something.
All the wares freak the fuck out because they're like, "Oh my god, she's dying. What do we do?" And Misery, who has some human knowledge because of Serena, Serena is a human, um, is like, "No, she probably just has like the flu. Like, go get this medication. She probably just has the flu. It'll be fine." And guess what? She probably just had the flu. So I think it's
Literally.
interesting that like they don't know like anything about each other. I'm like historically, supposedly this has been going on for years, and you don't like none of you thought to maybe like learn anything about each other. Okay, sure, I guess.
Yeah, you'd think, like you'd think they would learn their enemies' weaknesses and, like, what they can use against them and things like that, but they don't. So I'm just like, I feel like y'all are missing out on a lot of useful information that you could use. Maybe not in the best way, but okay. So all of their confusion around each other was silly and goofy, very funny. The whole thing with Ileana just getting like the flu or a cold or something was absolutely hilarious because of watching everyone scramble to try and figure out if they needed to take her to the hospital in human territory and like risking her safety and all of that was an absolute mess. And all that baby needed was like some cough syrup, a little bit of orange juice, maybe. She'll be all right. It was fine.
Yeah, it was
And it was
definitely
so goofy.
it was very silly. It was a very the scene was very cute because it was Misery because like through the whole book, like even up till close to the end, Misery tries to deny her feelings of affection towards Anna, right? Where she's like, I don't actually care about this little girl. I just have good enough morals that I wouldn't want to see harm come to her. By the end of the book, she kind of gets over herself about it. But that was one of the first scenes where I think we really see Misery being like, "Oh shit, maybe I do care about this kid." Um and
Yeah,
I
I really
think
do care about this kid. God
I
damn it.
I think the inclusion of Anna as a character is actually really good because we have Misery who has affection for people in the pack other than just Lo. It's not which I think kind of helps build the character and avoid some of the like isolationist tropes that you see with this kind of book where it's like she has to rely solely on Lo and so like that's why she clings to him. But I think because we have scenes with like Juno where Juno is one of Lo's seconds and Juno and uh Misery had gotten into it previously, but at one point she comes to apologize and they have like a good conversation. Or Anna, where, you know, Misery cares about Lo's little sister, completely separate from her feelings about Lo. And Alex, her and Alex have a great friendship. I think all of these relationships she has with the Wares that do not revolve around Lo make some of the ending of the book more plausible as to why she went back. And I think, honestly, even if the romantic aspect hadn't played out with Lo the way it did, which I'm not going to say was done well, but whatever. I'll get into that in a second. But I think even if romantically they hadn't like patched up what had happened, I I could see a plausible ending where Misery goes back to Were territory anyway because of Serena and because of Anna and because of Juno and Alex and all of them. So and that scene in particular, I think is one of the first scenes where we really see where the Wares are much more accepting of her and realizing like, oh, she does care. That and paired with the scene with Max that happens previously. Um, but yeah, I that scene was really good. Speaking of, we should probably talk about the scene with Max. um,
Max, poor guy. First of all, he's like only like what, 15? Oh my
I think
god.
he's very young. He is somebody who's in the house when uh Anna first gets there and he is kind of aggressive towards her for seemingly like no reason. He blames her for some of his family dying because they died at the hands of vampires. Okay, cool, get it, you know. Um, but at one point he makes an attempt to kidnap Lo's little sister, and Misery is watching from the window. She can't go into the sunlight, it burns them. It doesn't kill them right away, but it burns the vampires. So she's watching from the window and she sees Max like leading Liliana off into the woods. And in sheer panic, like true flight or flight, she is not thinking about it. She's not thinking about, you know, her previous mentions about not actually caring for this kid. She flips out and she books it. Downstairs, outside, she is getting burned to shit. But by God, is she gonna scoop up that little girl and go back inside with her? And that scene was probably one of my favorites in the book. Just because I
Yeah.
feel like that was the point of like, okay, this is Misery's actual character. Like taking out all of her internalized characterization, the things that she says about herself, this is who Misery is as a character. Like that felt to me like the shining example of why she's trying so hard to look for Serena and why she is the way she is around the Wares and, you know, what her life circumstances leading up to this point have made her to be was that scene for me personally. Um, and I think it also really solidified her dynamic with Anna and how that was going to play out for the rest of the book.
Anna, like you said, it gives Misery something else. Also, Anna is such good comedic relief.
Yes.
Ever she interacts with, and her and Lo's interactions are absolutely adorable. Lo is um there's so much about Anna, so much. It's very, very sweet. I just love every scene she was in. Every time she popped up, I was so excited for her to be there. I was like, "Yay, more Anna time." She's the absolute cutest. Um, her and the cat. I believe his name ends up being Sparkles.
Yes.
Is so adorable. The cat was originally Serena's, and then when Serena disappeared, Misery took the cat. And vampires, for whatever reason, don't have pets. Pets don't like them. Like their vampires are very off-putting to pets. So the cat does not fuck with Misery at all. They are sworn mortal enemies. They do not fuck with each other. Um, but when Misery gets to the pack, like Lowe's house, I keep wanting to call it the Pack's house because I keep thinking they all live together. They don't. Um, but when she gets there, the cat immediately attaches to Anna, like, right away, and Anna is so funny about it because Misery's like, "Where's my cat?" And Anna's like, "Your cat. It's my cat." And
Truly. There's a
and Misery's like
there is a
she's like
there's a scene where let me see if I can find it where it's that scene where she's like asking where the cat is and um she's telling her like, "Oh, the cat sleeps with me." Or whatever. And Misery's like, "Oh, that's where my cat's been going." And she says something about being a bitch, and it's so funny. Let me see if I can find it. I know I have it tabbed. Okay, she says, uh, it feels like the middle of the night when Anna yawns and decides it's time to go back to her room. My cat is waiting for me anyway. Wait, your cat? She nods. Does your cat happen to be gray, long hair, swished face? Yes, her name is Sparkles. Oh fuck. First of all, he's a boy. His name is Sparkles then. No, his name is Serena's damn fucking cat, which is what she calls this cat throughout the whole book. Um, Anna's expression is pitying, and he's actually my cat. Serena's whatever. I don't think so. You do she really just said, "No, you do realize that he arrived when I did, but he sleeps with me. Ah, so that's where he disappears to all the time. That's just because he hates me. Then maybe he's not your cat," she says, with the deliberate somberness of a therapist who's letting me know that I don't have a diagnosable disorder. I'm just a bitch. um, there's scenes where like the scene where she wants to throw a birthday party for Misery. Um, she never pronounces Misery's name correctly, which is very silly. And then definitely some of the scenes between her and Lo. There's a scene, the goddamn peanut butter scene. There is a scene where they're talking, and this is after Anna's like attempted kidnapping, and Lo is making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he cuts the crust off, and Misery's like, "Oh, that's kind of strange." And then like seconds later, Anna comes running down the stairs, and it's clear that he was making the sandwich for her. Um, but speaking of the fucking peanut butter scene, what what huh? Um, there's a scene where um they are, again, this is post kidnapping, and they're in the kitchen. They're talking. They're having a conversation, and he pulls out a jar of peanut butter. Um okay, he stands, goes to the no blood fridge. His broad shoulders shrink as he gathers a few items that he carries back to the table. A jar of peanut butter that has my most nefarious interests perk up. And then she talks about how, again, this weird thing where like they don't know anything about each other. She goes on about not knowing the difference between blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries, and how their naming conventions are silly. Um, and they're again continuing to talk, and she mentions uh seeing, this is like a whole page later. His eyes meet mine, serious and unsettling, not as husband and wife. Because we're that too, even if it's disturbingly easy to forget. I glance away, landing on a dollop of peanut butter on the rim of the jar. It's the variety without the crunchy bits, which dot dot dot, yeah. And it's like, girl, what are you talking about? I literally wrote, what the fuck does this mean? On my notes, because I was like, what is happening? Um, and then they continue talking, and she says they're talking about the fact that Anna is a half breed, because this has never happened and it's like very shocking. Um, he's saying that he had her DNA tested, that Juno helped. He picks up the knife again, slathers more jelly. The peanut butter jar is still there, open. And I just wrote, what is her fascination? Because this is the third time in like 5 pages that she's mentioned this goddamn jar of peanut butter. And then if you keep scrolling, if or not scrolling, if you keep going, so he's finished the PB&J. He's just standing there. They're still talking. Um, they're talking about her smell and how he seems to be offended by her smell. Because she's silly, goofy, and doesn't realize that he's not offended by it. He's just uh he's a werewolf, you know? Um but she says, the odor, just wondering if that's why I smell like fish soup to you. Have I lied too much in my life? It's a genuine question, but Lowe sighs deeply and leaves me hanging. He puts the food back in the fridge, with one glaring exception, the peanut butter. My gluttonous brain must be strained by the biological possibility of werehumans, because it dispatches my hand to scoop up a little glob from the rim right to my lips, and it's been so long, it's so fucking good. And Lo is like, oh, what the fuck? um,
Man, I think he saw a ghost when he watched her eat that fucking peanut butter. He saw God. He
and
was so
then
confused.
she's like completely embarrassed. She's so upset by this. And at this point we learn that their molars are vestigial, which I don't understand how a molar can be vestigial. Like your teeth are like your bones. She's basically saying like they can't chew with their molars, which is such a strange anatomy choice to me. Like I feel
Yeah,
like
there's a lot of strange anatomy choices in
I
this book.
I feel like Ali Hazelwood could have just been like, "Oh, it's just harder to digest food," but like peanut butter is pretty soft, so it's not a big deal. I don't know why she went with the vestigial molars. Anyway, so she's she's going, "Please kill me now, so you can digest food. Some of it. Our molars are mostly vestigial, so no chewing. But peanut butter is smooth and creamy, and I know it's wrong. I shiver with how amazing it tastes." And with how shameful and self-indulgent food eating is considered among vampires. Not even living among the humans has beaten the belief out of me. So it's
And then,
very
and then Lo meets her do this, is so shocked by it, so surprised. He's like, "Oh my fucking god, you can do that? Do it again!" And he immediately like goads her with the fucking jar of peanut butter. It's such
Mind
a
you,
silly scene.
mind you, now that this whole scene is plot relevant. Like, this whole
Yeah.
scene is important to the book because so this happens and then like okay, they have more weird conversations. Basically, the between trying to find Serena, they think that the previous alpha's wife maybe has something to do with a group called the Loyals, and that maybe that has something to do with it. So they're trying to find information from this person, from this woman. Um, and so that's what they're doing in the middle of the book. They're still looking for Serena, but they're also doing this stuff with a woman named Emery where they're trying to find out what the fuck she's been up to. And they kind of get to a point where they have mostly figured out what's going on. They're getting to a point where they're finding answers, and Misery eats out of a jar of peanut butter, and it's poisoned because they realize that she likes peanut butter. So that whole fucking part is in fact plot relevant because of the fact that later she gets poisoned because they put poison in her jar of peanut butter,
They poisoned her peanut butter.
which is so silly to me. Um
It's so goofy.
so a lot of this book like is a little bit forgettable. Like, okay, the main plot of like they're looking for Serena. Okay. The stuff with the Loyals and Emery is kind of like plot relevant, but also by the end it doesn't really end up being plot relevant. Um
Yeah.
but they go to Emery's house. Um because they want to like hack into her computer to monitor her, to both go back and look at her previous communications and then to monitor any future communications. And Lo wants to go by himself, but here is the thing. Lo is computer illiterate. Somehow this man has an architecture degree. Somehow this man can fly a plane, but he is completely tech illiterate. I don't know why she made this decision. I don't know why what it doesn't make any sense that he is an architecture in a contemporary setting, but he doesn't know how to use a computer. Um, he can
Doesn't make any
fly
sense that he can fly
a
a
plane.
plane if he can't use the computer.
It's so bizarre. Whatever. So he's computer illiterate, which is why he takes uh Misery with him on this like mission. And um they do have a conversation prior to going about mates. So at the very beginning, there is like a conversation that happens where somebody tells Misery that so they did swap collateral, the werewolves and the vampires, even though technically the marriage should have taken care of the alliance. They did it anyway. So there is a were who's being kept with the vampires. And somebody tells her that the were that got sent is Lo's mate. And so her and Lo have a few conversations about mates and how it works. And it all comes off a little bit weird, and Lo is kind of like coy about it. And it's very clear that like the point is that Misery is his mate, not the person that gets sent to be collateral. Um, but Lo is pretending that that's not the case, supposedly for Misery's protection. But they go to see Emery, and um let's see. They go to see Emery, and basically Lo is like, "Well, I have to mark you." um he says, "I need to send Emery and her people the message that you're part of my pack and no violence against you will be tolerated, not just the verbal message. You said you do that by marking me, right?" Um, and then they have a moment of Lo being autistic. And talking because Misery says, I don't need to speed read Architecture for Dummies and pretend I can tell Gothic and Art Deco apart. He turns to be stone-faced. You're joking. Please look ahead. You can, right? You are able to tell apart? Husband, darling, deep inside you know the answer to that. And please look at the road when you're landing a plane. So they start talking about the marking thing, and then he does it, and this is our first bit of like any kind of smutty content. Um, I liked this scene. I thought it was fairly well written. Um, he,
I think is probably the best smutty scene in this whole book,
yeah, he really
for
just like
sure.
immediately goes off the fucking deep end. He gets like one hand on her and is like, "Oh, I see." And like he from this point on, Lo has no thoughts in his head anymore.
Not a fucking thought, not a coherent, like rational thinking, none. Out the window. He's going on full body and instinct alone.
So that happens, and then they go to meet Emery, and we get introduced to Cohen, who basically Lo was a threat to the previous alpha from the beginning. Like there's just some way that they can tell when somebody is going to grow up to be like a powerful wolf. So he was sent away when he was very young to a man named Cohen. Um, and Cohen off the bat is described as being an asshole. Um,
I believe Misery says he is an asshole in the most delicious and entertaining way possible, and
yes,
that's right up my alley. I love an asshole. I love a funny,
this
like, funny haha,
that
and that's
part.
exactly what Cohen is.
Um,
I love him.
so yeah, so Lo's introduced. There's some parts where Misery in here. This is where we start to get to like peak Misery being like, "Oh, he could never be attracted to me despite the fact that he's clearly attracted to her." Um like
Rocks in her brain.
she says they're talking about the marking thing, and Lo is saying like it's basically explicitly like a sexual thing. And she says, "Oh, right. I'm a bit mortified to have assumed he was attracted to me. Not because I don't think I'm attractive, but because Lo has Gabby, someone he's biologically hardwired to focus the entirety of his attraction on." And it's like, bestie, he, like, what just happened in that plane says completely otherwise. And I need
Literally.
you to, like, think before you speak for a moment. Um, so, okay, they keep going. I'm trying to find, they keep talking about the mate thing, and like again they're just kind of silly, and like they're playing coy with each other, and Misery's for sure thinking like, oh, he doesn't like me. But then
Yeah.
they go to um basically skim Emery's computer, and they almost get caught. And so they had got the excuse for them getting up from the table was so that Misery could go feed. And they go into this room, they're trying to get the computer thing, and then they get caught. So this is the first time Misery feeds directly from Lo. This is her first time feeding from a person at all, ever. Um, and of course they immediately almost have to bone right then and there. um, she is like, she's having too much fun. Um, he's got a fucking boner. Like it's just like a whole thing. Um and then at some point, this is again where I'm like, I hate both of you. Um he says, some of the dialogue, I could fuck you very nicely right now. I almost did. I'm sorry. I never imagined it would lead to. I know. I'm just really, I've never felt like this. And then she goes, like what? And I'm like, Misery, I need you. You have a computer science degree. What is wrong with you? What do you mean? You know what is going on. Ugh.
She's had one friend her entire life. I know she can read a room. I would hope better for her. Once again, rocks around up there. Oh my god.
Yeah. So then Anna
Scene.
this is when Anna gets sick, is right after that. But it's just like the whole like they literally two times within like 24 hours they have like a weird like sexual encounter and Misery is still like, no, he's not attracted to me at all. Okay.
He does
Okay.
not want yet. Like he very much lost his composure when he first like laid a hand on you in that plane and act. And you're like, no, he couldn't want me. Misery, please. Girl, I want better for you. Oh, we have more common sense than this. I believe in you, girl. Come on. And she continues with that, like, as time goes, like, as they get more intimate with each other and they start getting more touchy-feely and things like that, she continues with the mindset of, "He has a mate, he could never really love me like that, blah, blah, blah," and I'm like, "Misery, Misery, come on."
I do just want to clarify because it kind of sounds like Misery is not a homewrecker in this situation. Basically Lo tells her like, yes, the werewolves can have mates. It is like it is very Twilight-esque in how it works in that it's like a gravity shift and like now this person is everything and all of this stuff. However, Lo makes it clear that a mate bond or whatever can be unrequited. And he tells her as much that his mate bond or whatever is unrequited. So it's not like Misery is home wrecking or whatever. Like she has been told explicitly, like, oh, I'm in love with this person, she is not in love with me. So it's not like, and also the person is Misery, Lo just doesn't tell her that. But to Misery's knowledge, she is not like home wrecking or anything. Because he tells her as much that his mate is like unreciprocated or whatever. Um
She's just very she takes it as, like, all his mind,
mhm.
and I'm like, "Misery, girl, read between the lines, please." Eventually she gets there, but she's only after meeting Gabby. They eventually do
Yeah.
meet the Wear collateral, and she realizes Lo had no reaction to seeing her, and like couldn't even remember what she was studying in school, and yet Lo knew so many tiny details about Misery right off the bat without even hesitating, and she's like, "Oh,
Like Lo has
oh."
committed her, so they each got a file on each other before the wedding, and like Lo has committed her file to memory. Like there are multiple times where he references directly from the file he was given, and she just like doesn't think about like that information. Like there's stuff he remembers that he is not like he doesn't need to remember these things for his political espionage, you know? But she just doesn't like up until this point, up until they meet Gabby, she just does like it just does not cross her mind in the slightest.
Yeah,
I
she's
will
like,
say before
"Establish
they meet
in
Gabby,
my file."
yeah. I will say before they meet Gabby, um so Anna gets sick and then immediately after Anna gets sick is when Misery gets poisoned. Um and she comes out of they put her in like a healing trance is what they call it, and as soon as she comes out of the healing trance there's a moment where she gets to see Lo's shifted form, and he's a big old white wolf, which is my favorite. I love white wolf vampires. um so she comes out of the healing trance and then it's a few days later and she's like taking a bath and Lo is in the bathroom with her. Um, whatever. They talk and then they do it. Kind of. Um, they okay. They do all this stuff. There's the scene where it's like implied that Lo climaxes in his jeans. Um which is so much. Um and the only reason we know that is because Misery says that she can feel that his jeans are are like wet. um so that's like the second, well technically that's like the third smut scene we get. Which is not the worst one, but it's fine, I guess. Um and then they go to meet Gabby. Um
And the ever iconic Owen, Ms. twin brother. About Owen
yes.
yet? He
I love
must. He
Owen.
is so like, everything about him is great. I want a book on his city. I want to see Owen's world. He's so funny.
Real.
I would love to see more
He's
of him and Lo
so,
interact.
yes. He is so slay. Also, we did skip over the nodding part the first time it gets brought up. Because they do it again one more time before they go meet the governor and Gabby and all of that. Anyway, it's brought up kind of where because Lo is like, we are not compatible because of this and whatever. He's like, I can't, whatever. It's brought up. That's like the only ABO thing in this book, other than like, okay, they're werewolves, is the nodding part. And it's like, okay, sure, I guess. And like that's the part that like freaked everybody out from what I could see online. Um, was that. So yeah. They
And it
go,
does come up again later.
yes, it does come up again later, but that's the only ABO thing in the book. Like there's nothing else in the book about the ABO thing. Can you hear me? Okay. So that's the only ABO thing that carried over. Anybody who tells you this is an ABO book is incorrect. Um
Yeah.
you can't just like take the one aspect and then call it an ABO book. That's just not, it's not Omegaverse. Um
No.
okay, and then we get the scene with Gabby. Uh where literally, so the beginning of the end of the chapter prior to this and the beginning of this one, a lot of it is Misery internally being like, oh, like this is who he's in love with actually, like, you know, we're just fucking around. The beginning of this chapter, the blurb from Lo says he feels like the entire world is in the palm of his hand. She seems happy too, and mystified by her own happiness, as though the feeling is something new and foreign. It was him wondering whether he could make this work. She's not where, and her lack of familiarity could be a blessing. She wouldn't need to know the full truth, which in turn would ensure her freedom. So, like, he internally is like, I'm so in love with her. Meanwhile, she's having like a panic attack about meeting this girl. She's like freaking out. It's so silly. Oh, I found the cuckoo bananas line.
Yeah, she's used bonkers and cuckoo bananas by this point. And I'm like, she's just like me for real. Wow.
Yeah, she basically her brother wants to overthrow their father as like the head of the vampire council or whatever. And he's asking for Misery's support. And she says, my support. I push away from the car and disentangle from Lo, facing my brother. My cuckoo bananas brother. Making a bid, that's not a thing people do. Um, so whatever. They all go back and forth. Um they basically Owen is like, I'm going to overthrow my father as the councilman. Um, Gabby, I guess, is kind of helping. Gabby is basically like, Owen is the only person who ever talks to me. So I like him, I guess. Um, and again, they have like a weird thing where Gabby is like, or Lo doesn't seem to like really give a shit.
Yeah,
um,
he's just there for
he's like smiling at Misery and stuff, and she's like having a weird time. She says, "It's possible that I understand next to nothing about wares, about love, about Lo and Gabby. It's possible that I'm an idiot who reads too much into too little, but I feel something deep in my belly, and I know it to be right. Lo may have a mate, but she's not Gabby." And it's like, okay, you're so close. You're so close.
more. Just like one more step and you got it.
Please just get there.
I'm begging you, Misery. It's right there.
Ugh.
And eventually she does get there and she's like, I'm going to confront him about it. They go back to
They
Misery's old house in
yes.
like her old apartment
Mhm.
in human territory.
No, they were in where they were in the vampire territory, weren't they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's human because she lived in human territory before
Oh,
they dragged her off
maybe. I don't remember
because
now.
she was so like adamant. She was so adamant about not being a part of the vampires because she was like they don't like
Oh,
see me as one of their own or something like
yeah, it
that.
must have been the human apartment because I think she talks about not having a bed.
Yeah. And like they get there and they're having a whole thing and Lo is absolutely overcome with how much the apartment smells like her and he's just like, I need a minute. Give me like a and it is so funny. And eventually they do it again. The nodding thing comes up once more and he's like, I can't do it. I don't want to hurt you, that whole thing. So he pulls out like when he's done. Um and this girl her pants aren't even pulled up yet. And this stupid man pulls the worst trope, like one of my most hated tropes of I'm going to hurt your feelings exponentially to keep you safe. And he says like she confronts him about the mate thing and is like, I know it's me. I know it's me, and like she's actively happy about it, is reciprocating. And he's like, so sorry if I gave you the wrong idea,
Oh my
but
god, I hate him
no.
so much. But like I I really do like Lo, but in that moment I was like, I don't know if I can finish this book. Actually.
Like I wanted to beat his ass. I was so tired. But he's like, yeah, no, Misery, no, you just and then he brings up the whole thing of like she's never had freedom in her life and how she's never really had somebody care about her because she thinks at this point Serena was lying to her and genuinely didn't care about her anymore, or whatever. And he's like, you're obsessed with the idea of eternal love. And I'm like, I could strangle you, Lo. I actually could. How
Literally,
dare you?
she's pouring her heart out. She's basically like, I haven't figured it all out. I don't have much experience with feelings, but I really do like you. And then he says, I'm sorry if I've ever given you the wrong impression about what is happening between us. And then she says, Lo, come on, I know Gabby isn't your mate. She isn't, but I'm afraid you reached the wrong conclusions. And then they have a little bit more back and forth, and Lo is like, I don't want to talk about this, basically. And he says, Misery, you should stop filling your mouth with where words you cannot understand. It was a mistake telling you about the concept of mates. It's not something any non-were can fully comprehend, let alone a vampire. But I understand how appealing it might be for someone who struggles with belonging. Misery, you have been abandoned and mistreated your entire life by your family, by your people, by your only friend. You are fascinated with the idea of eternal love and companionship, but that doesn't reflect what I feel for you. And again, she's like trying to be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? She says, tell me that you're not in love with me, that you don't want to be with me. And he says, I'm sorry, I think you're very attractive and I enjoy spending time with you. I enjoyed fucking you and I wish you the best, but I see that this was a mistake, but it's for the best. You don't want to be tied to someone like me. You should be free. And from now on, you and I should probably be apart. And it's like, I just, like, first of all, this trope is so stupid and I hate it so much. Like, there's no, like, like, what is the point? You know, I understand that, at least in his defense, it is only partially a safety thing. The other part of it is he feels like he would unnecessarily be tying her to him by expressing that she is his mate. But
Mhm.
also, like, his whole thing up till this point has been a lot of wanting to give her autonomy. The whole point of him doing this is technically in his own mind to give her autonomy, but by doing this, he really takes away any choice that she has when she is trying to express that she has similar feelings to him. So it's so weird. It feels a little out of character. And also, I just don't like this trope. It's overplayed and stupid. It was like at this point in the book, I was like, okay, I have to close the book for a little bit because I can't. This is so fucking stupid. Why are we having this conversation now with like 100
Yeah,
pages left in the book? Like, what the fuck? You're not really protecting her, whatever.
yeah.
Um,
I got to that. I was like, how are we wrapping all of this up in this tiny amount of time? And he's done this. What? I was very concerned. Um, and then we get the big quote twist, I assume. Um, it really truly wasn't a twist. A lot of this book and the things that happens in it are very predictable. You can see them coming. The things are very much laid out in front of you on a silver platter. Um, but one of Lowe's seconds, his name is Mick, and we're introduced to Mick like as a father figure to Lowe. They are very close. Um, all that, and Lowe and Mick, have their whole dynamic, whatever. But Misery has it like gets very attached to Mick. Like he becomes one of her favorite wares in the building. Loves that guy. Turns out Mick betrays everyone and kidnaps Misery after Lowe leaves, after he pulls that bullshit. And he's like, yeah, Mick will come pick you up. Even though he easily could have just been like, hey, I gotta go handle some stuff. I'll see you later. Mick's gonna come get you. He didn't have to be mean and hateful like that. He didn't. But he chose to. Um, and then Mick comes and kidnaps Misery. Come to find out, they've kidnapped Serena. That's where Serena's been the entire time. She was kidnapped by Wares, and we then later learn not just by Wares, but by the vampires as well. And Misery wakes up in like this like room somewhere and Serena's there. And no, they've been kidnapped. This is a dangerous situation. They are bantering like nothing's going on. It is one of those like tonal shifts of like this is a very serious situation, but they are being so silly. And to an extent, I think if me and my best friend got kidnapped, we'd be doing the same thing. But in a book, it's a little jarring.
yeah, like so they're
Oh,
they're in this room together and fucking okay. So she wakes up in the room, uh, and she realizes that Serena is there. Why, hello, how lovely of my oldest and most treasured friend to join me in my humble abode. I'm your only friend. Correct and rude. What the fuck? And then they go back and forth. And then she's like, "Okay, you've been gone for like this long." And Misery hugs her and she goes, "Did you just initiate physical touch? What is happening? Did you start therapy while I was gone?" And then they go back and forth again about being kidnapped. And she says, "You look good. That's a weird thing to say in the let's exchange vital info stage of a joint abduction. It was a compliment. Fine, thanks. I was always very self-conscious of my forehead, as you know." But maybe unnecessarily. Maybe I'll spare myself the whole monthly trim. And then Misery tells her to shut up. So then they start like planning about how they're gonna get out. And then they start bantering again about like the books that are in this room that she's being kept in. Um and then they are like again going back and forth about everything. And then she finally admits that she married low because she hadn't explained that up until this point. Um and then they keep going back and forth. And at one point, like, Serena starts to freak out and she's like, "I didn't know if you would come find me because we got into that fight. I wasn't sure that you would come looking for me. I kind of said things I didn't mean and I figured maybe you were done with me." Dude, I didn't know that was an option. Like, they're just so unserious. And I get this dynamic between them had already kind of been established because, like, Misery talks about how they would get into fights when they were younger, and it would just kind of resolve when one of them did something stupid and they laughed about it. So this kind of unserious nature of their relationship has already been established, but it does feel super strange that your friend who has been missing for like 4 months at this point, who you only joined, like, you only did any of this to find her, and you find her, and you guys are doing this weird bantering nonsense where, like, you're calling each other stupid. It's very silly. Um,
They are very unserious about this whole situation.
like, I guess technically
So
it's even, like, explicitly addressed. She says, "We regard each other. If we were better people, less screwed up, we'd probably be able to say something like, 'I love you,' or 'so glad to be together again,' or slightly more macabre, 'Thank fuck you're not dead.' But we both stay silent because that's what we do. We both know the unsaid because that's who we are." So, like, it's clear that it's because of their dynamic. It still does feel a little jarring.
yeah, very whiplash. I was like, y'all, please. I know funny haha. I would do it too if it were me and my best friend, but I need you to get serious for 5 minutes. I'm begging you. And then, they kind of come up with like a quick little scheme to try and get one of the guards distracted enough that they can get out. And it seems like the guards are all wares because wares are very strong. They can easily take down a vampire, the whole shebang. And basically, vampires in this world can do what's called thrall, and that's where you take control of the person's mind. And and so Misery tries to do it to the guard, but she's not good at it. Apparently, you have to be really strong to do it, and she's not good at it whatsoever. And, and the guard, like, realizes what she was trying to do, and he's like, "Did you just try to fucking thrall me? How dare you?" And he sticks his arm through like a little window in the door and tries to like grab Misery and I guess hurt her or whatever. And Serena, girl bosses, badass bitch, like essentially breaks his arm and says, let us out. And that's exactly what happens. And I'm like, you know what? I love that for you, Serena. I'm so happy for
I
you.
will say also at this point
And they
we do know that Serena, the reason that she gets wrapped up in all of this in the first place is because she is also a half-breed. That's like the other twist is like, oh, okay, this is why Serena went missing. This is how she's connected to the wares. yada yadas because she's also a half breed like Anna. Um so
Which saw that coming, saw that coming a mile away. If Misery was a little bit more like aware, I think she could have seen it coming as well, but she was not. Like, there's some hints very clearly laid out that like kind of give it away that we learn, but Misery was just completely oblivious, living in her own little world. And she's so surprised. She's like, "What?" And it's like, Misery, sweetheart, sometimes you're so smart, and sometimes I don't know where it's gone. Um, but then, that big reveal happens. They escape from the room they're in and come to find out it is just the attic of like her father's like work building.
yeah, fucking
It's just the attic.
insanity. Um so all of that happens. There's like the weird basically we find out that Serena can shift. This was like a whole plot point earlier, basically that Anna can't shift, so she feels sometimes left out from the rest of the pack, to the point where Lo will forego shifting on the full moon, which is something only a powerful werewolf can do, in order to stay with Anna because she feels left out. So when Misery meets back up with Serena, and we know now that Serena is also a half-breed, she's under the assumption that Serena can't shift. Basically, they all get caught, they're all having their throwdown. Misery's father is like, well, I'm gonna keep Serena and Anna locked up, and I'm just gonna kill the rest of you. And Girl Boss Queen Owen, girl bosses,
Hmm.
um, and let's see, where's the scene?
I believe he brings in Lo, and
Yes.
he's
He has Lo. Owen brings out Lo, and um, at first Misery is like, "Did Owen lie to me? Like, is he just like was he planning to just betray us? You know,
the time.
the whole time?" And then they go back and forth. Basically, her father knows that Lo cares about Misery. You know, in that sense. Um,
Hmm.
And then they go back and forth about Liliana. I'm really just looking for the part with uh okay, basically all of it was a ruse so that they could kill everyone. So Owen brings in Lo so that Lo can shift. And then of course we find out that Serena can also shift, so they shift and then kill everybody. And then after the fact, they've got Misery's father tied to a chair. Um
Blindfolded
blindfolded.
and with noise canceling headphones on.
um So Owen uh is like, "Can I like talk to him?" Lo nods as he takes off. So he takes the stuff off. Owen is crouching. Um they regard each other. It's father who finally breaks the silence by saying, "I want you to know that I would do all of it again." His voice is too strong for my taste, almost obscenely calm. I wish I could watch him beg for mercy, see him doubt his ridiculous righteousness and the courage of his stupid convictions. I wish he could suffer even just an ounce, even just at the end of it. I wish there was some comeuppance for everything he has done. And then I don't have to wish. And then I don't have to wish, because after nodding pensively, Owen grins wide. Fair enough. What I want you to know, he promises, voice low and clear, is that as I take over your place on the council, I will work hard to undo every shitty little thing you have built in the last few decades. I'm going to broker alliances with the wares and the humans that won't just benefit us. I'm going to do everything I can to facilitate truces between them, and when this area is at peace and the vampire's influence is reduced to near insignificance, I'm going to take your fucking ashes and scatter them where the borders and the entry points used to be, so that wares and humans and vampires can step over them without even realizing it, Daddy. Slay.
He's
I love him
he's
so
so.
much. And I think
This is why I say I want Owen time.
yes.
I want
We
only
need
Owen
we need a
time.
just a purely Owen book. I want to know what political espionage he was doing behind the scenes because he this like plan had been in motion for a while. Not necessarily the part where like
Mhm.
Misery gets kidnapped and shit, but like his plan to overtake his father had been in motion for a while, and he tells Misery that he had all of these like political connections already in place. Um so I too would love a purely Owen book. Um, Especially like that scene is so good. Um,
He's so slay.
Truly. And what I think is interesting is like they have a discussion at the beginning of the book, and Misery is basically like we were close kind of when we were kids, and then like basically when she came back after Collateral, that they weren't very close anymore. But most of what he talked about and most of what he's doing and like why he wants to overthrow his father is because he saw how much it messed up Misery, and he's kind of doing this for her, which I think is so interesting. That like a lot of his motivation is because of what happened to Misery.
He's not only is he so girl boss slay, he's also a sweet brother, and I think that's funny. We have very like little bits of interaction between Owen and Misery throughout this book, like little phone calls, like before the wedding, things of that nature, and they are so snarky together. I love them as a sibling dynamic. They are so funny. And I think just not only having the political espionage of what Owen was doing, like in a book, I want to know the kind of friendship he developed with Gabby while she was Collateral because I know they did, and I know at first she was probably like very like off put and like quiet to herself. Meanwhile, he's like, "Hey, bitch, let's let's go fucking overthrow some shit. You want to help?" And it's I want to know so bad what his life is like. I love him. I love him so much. I need to know. And
Truly.
so after that, it's like they're trying to decide what to do with Misery's dad. And Misery's like, "Well, whatever you decide, I don't want to know." Misery, what about me? What about us? Maybe we wanted to know, actually. What about my needs, Misery? So we don't know what happens to dear old dad. Um makes me a little sad. I would have enjoyed to know. Um, and then they go home. All of this conflict happens in what? Couple chapters?
Yeah,
Barely?
barely. Like the there's the chapter where Lo fucks everything up and is an asshole. There's a middle chapter where like Misery is trying to like reckon with what just happened and also like get cleaned up, and then that's when Mick shows up to get her. And then we get this chapter with Serena and her escaping, and pretty much immediately after they escape is when they get kidnapped again. They get taken into custody or whatever, and get taken to her father. Uh, and then by the time like okay, so then they have like a whole back and forth where her father is threatening Misery with like Anna's life pretty much. Um and all this stuff, and then at the very end of that chapter, basically all we get told is that Lo and Serena shift. And we don't actually get to see
Mhm.
the fight scene because then it just cuts to Misery getting made fun of. But like this is one of those tonal moments too. We have this super serious situation. We're learning the twist. The twist is that it was her dad the whole time. Like, they're reunited and now they're learning all of this information, and she for a second thinks that Owen is going to betray her, and then they shift and this fight scene happens that we don't get to see. And then you cut to the next chapter and it is like Alex and Gabby making fun of Misery because she didn't assume that like their clothes would just get ripped off when they shifted. So we had this super serious like fight scene, like all this stuff, and it cuts immediately to them making fun of her, which is so like bizarre. Um, and then
Very
we
well.
get a little bit of wrap up with the scenario with the situation with Owen talking about the dad, whatever. But yeah, all of that happened in like maybe 60 to 80 pages. Um,
Yeah.
and then and then this is where I also get frustrated. So all of this happens. It feels like the whole plot point with Lo being an asshole was kind of for nothing because it didn't protect her and like she still whatever. All this happened anyway. So they finish whatever and they patch Misery up and Misery's like, "Okay, peace out. I'm going to go to fucking bed." So her and Serena go sleep in her childhood bedroom because they're still in the nest. And Lo just fucks off. All the werewolves,
Just
they just
leaves.
leave. He just fucks off and doesn't talk to her. Like this whole scenario happened partially because of Lo's stupidity, and he just doesn't say anything to her. They just leave. It's like there's like a
Yeah.
week in between when the situation happened and when they talk again. Like a good solid week. He just doesn't he didn't bother to talk to her. Um which is so like I just okay. All right. Okay.
And then they like um I believe Misery decides, she wants Serena to be with the wares and, learn how to be aware in whatever capacity that means for her. So she brings her to like the were territory and lets Serena meet Juno. And not gonna lie, we'll get we'll get to it in a minute. Sick and twisted that Juno and Serena couldn't be lesbians. Couldn't be. Sick. I think that could be great, but it was taken from us. We'll get to that. Um, and Serena's having a blast, like having fun with Juno, being a werewolf, whatever. And Misery's like, maybe I should go to Lo's house and like get my shit because he clearly doesn't want me there. So she goes and she gets to her room. All of her stuff is packed up in boxes. So she's like, yeah, clearly I'm being kicked the fuck out. And Lo comes in and he's like, hey,
Hey
so are you
girly.
gonna come move back in? Hey, girly pop. And she's like, what are you talking about? Move back in, stay here with you. You quite literally said you did not feel anything for me and you don't want me here. And he's like, no, that's not the truth.
Yeah, like literally
And
she goes into the house. She goes into her room to what used to be her room and sees everything's boxed up and goes, "I'm not welcome here anymore. I'm being evicted. There's probably a reason Lo wouldn't just kick you out, but I can't twist myself into not caring." Yada yada yada. And then Lo is there and they go back and forth. She's talking about Serena. She asks about Anna. We find out that like Emery was not tied to what happened, but like was still guilty of other stuff. That's how they
yeah,
wrap up
that whole
that
thing
plot
was a
point.
red herring. It was very much a red herring and like barely wrapped up. Like it was just like, oh yeah, I forgot I did this. Let me put a bow on that real quick.
Yeah. Uh,
Not a very good wrapping job.
no. But then he says, "It's not like you. What isn't? Not saying exactly what you think." Right, yeah. It was easier being honest with you when I thought you were being honest with me. He frowns. You can speak honestly with me, Misery, always. Like, bitch, bud, what the fuck is wrong with you?
What
And then she
are you
says,
talking about?
"Why would I, though? So you can use my deepest wounds and what you know about my past to hurt me when you decide that you should push me away?" And then he says, "I'm sorry. You lied. You said all of that, and it was all a lie. Why? I could force you to tell me the truth. I could thrall you. You already have, Misery." I hate this man. I was so pissed off. And then she's like, "Am I your mate? I meant what I said. You should not use where words you cannot comprehend." Like, but like, why are you doing this right now, dude?
Just
Um,
tell her yes or no. Jesus Christ.
so and then basically he's like, "Well, he says, it means that I don't want you to make decisions based on my needs. I don't want you to be with me because you have to, because you're worried that otherwise I'll be miserable. At the wedding, when you were near me for the first time, I was angry. I was furious that for some joke of fate, I had found my mate and they were someone I could never really love. I wanted you more than anything else, and yet I felt trapped by you. And then I began spending time with you. I began knowing you, and you made me happy. You made me better. You made me want to be every part of myself, even the ones I thought I'd left behind. And one day I woke up and realized that if you didn't smell like the best thing in the world, I still wouldn't want you any less. And then he says, but I can survive without you, misery. All I need to do is be without you. All I need to do is
Yes.
bear it. And it won't be good, but I think it would be better than watching you become unhappy, than letting my love for you bind you to me when you would rather. And then she's like, hey, can you shut the fuck up?
What about me? What about my love for you? Shut up, Lo. And it's so he's like he pulls the whole I don't want you to have to be burdened by my feelings. And she's like, bitch, please. What about me? Have you ever thought to ask how I feel? Maybe. I don't. And she goes on a whole tangent of like, if she wants to love him, then she fucking will. And he's just like, oh, ahaha, okay, basically.
What's crazy
And
what's crazy to me, right, is he tells her all of this that like, oh, he doesn't want her to be burdened by his feelings and like she all this stuff and like still not wanting to admit that she is his mate and all of this stuff. And yet in the next sentence, so she's ranting about how like if I want to be in love with my stupid were husband, I'll be in love with my stupid were husband. And you better unpack all these boxes and all this stuff. So he has already stated like his presumption was that she wouldn't want to stay with him. And yet after she starts going on this rant, she's like, "Oh, well, I'm," he tells her he's replacing the windows in the house to be special vampire windows so that she can walk around the house during the day without being worried about the windows. And it's like, so what the fuck was okay.
what was the point, Sarah?
Like
What was
that's
the
so
point?
presumptuous of you. Like you act like you think she's not going to want to be with you, but then you have the gall to presume that she's going to stay in the house anyway? Okay.
Yeah.
Weird. Anyway, then
Silly man. Silly, silly man.
silly man, and then they do it again. And
Yeah.
it's
He says a line I really like, though, even in his silly man bullshit. He says a line where I think Misery says something like, I don't want to be a she says it has to be hard to feel like you couldn't walk away even if you wanted to, like someone is going to be your problem forever. Then he says, "You're not a problem, Misery. You're a privilege." And I quite like that, even in his silly man ways. He's so goofy, but that was really sweet. And I don't forgive him for being a silly man, but he gets to be a little dumb for like 5 minutes because that was nice. And then they do it. We also in this time get the first "I love you," and I believe the only "I love you," and
yeah.
it comes from he doesn't say it back ever. Like she says, "I love this, I love you," and he does not say it back. And I'm assuming it's just the every time he calls her his mate is him saying "I love you," but he could have still said it. He could have.
I don't yeah, that seems like a strange writing choice, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he's still insecure. It's a little it's
He might still be insecure, highly likely, wouldn't shock me.
yeah, it
Um,
definitely is
and then
strange.
he might still be insecure. Then they do it, and the like real official nodding happens.
Yeah.
They do it, and the way this scene is written is so. it's something, certainly. I don't know if I'd call it good by any standards. Some of the phrases that were used are crazy as hell,
Okay,
actually.
here's the thing. This scene, out of like the what 5 or 6 smut scenes we get, is the worst one because of the dialogue. It feels like super out of
Yeah.
character. It's really weird. Like it was at this point where I was like, okay, Ali Hazelwood really doesn't get the vibe. Like, cause what is going on? Like, use the what the Papa Not lines.
Crazy, crazy. Why would he say that? Why would he say that? Why would he say that?
So
It was so very much. It absolutely does feel, like, weirdly out of character for him. Like, I know that man is unhinged right now, like, he's finally getting to do what he wants and, like, really, like, be intimate with her in the ways that, like, he wants, and she's getting to do the same thing and all that, but it feels some of these dialogue choices feel so, like, left field for him,
yeah,
incredibly so, and they're very jarring, and you're just like, "There's no way I just read that."
yeah.
There's no way my eyes just
And like, there's a part where like he's talking
my
about
eyes
yeah, and there's like a part where he's talking about like the mate bite or whatever. Some of the dialogue around like the quote unquote ABO stuff is weird, and it feels out of place. And this scene
Yeah,
especially feels like that. I just I don't know. It's very weird.
and what's so funny about it is that's the final chapter before the epilogue. That's how the book ends. For the epilogue, it's just them having sex, having a good time. And that's so funny to me that that's how she chose. I'm gonna put the ending right here. Like while they're about to start doing it again. It's such a choice that she made. And then the epilogue happens, and then you're done. And the dialogue in like the nodding scenes, it's so it feels kind of clunky in a way. It doesn't feel very natural. Um,
It doesn't feel
like
natural. It feels out of character, and it feels very like shoehorned in. Where I think Ellie Hazelwood didn't really know what she was doing. You know,
no, she did not. I think she was just no.
she was trying her best.
Yeah, she was doing what she thought was right, and I have to respect. Yeah, the first time she's ever done this, I have to respect it. It's hard to write like smut of any kind, but it's especially hard to probably write.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
especially hard to credit where it's due.
do you want to talk
It's
about
not the best in the world, but it's also not the worst. So
that part?
do it's fine.
Do you want to
And
talk?
then we get to the epilogue.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to talk about the epilogue?
I want to. I want to.
Lucy,
Yes, sorry.
you were breaking up real bad, and then you were silent. Do you want to talk about the epilogue?
Yes, I do. I want to rant about this fucking epilogue choice so bad. This whole book is first person. The whole book, prologue included, is first person. And then the epilogue, for whatever reason, switches to third person. And it's from Lo's perspective, but it is third person. And I can't understand why she made that choice. Maybe to set up for a sequel. I don't know. I still think it was a funky, like weird decision to do that. And it really like threw me for a loop for a second. I had to, like get back into it because I was like, what? Why are we suddenly outside of someone's head? Why am I looking from a third POV? Hello? And, and but other than that, the epilogue is very cute. It's just like Lo and Misery, decorating. It's very cute, really cute. Still no I love you from Lo at all. Um and then the book ends with Cohen coming to visit and he sees Serena and it hits him that Serena is his mate. And it does that thing where it says, like, this book talks about how mates are a rare thing. That's usually how it goes in books that talk about mates. They say, oh, mates are so rare. And then suddenly everybody's got one. What, what? It gets under my skin when they do that sometimes, of like, oh, they're so rare. It's like once in a lifetime kind of thing. Or like something of that nature where it's so obscure. And then suddenly it happens not once but twice. And you're like, well, is it really that rare? Okay. All right. Um the book ends, the final line is like, this is going to be a problem, I believe is like the last line.
Yeah, Lo is like,
Yeah,
"Oh shit."
this he thinks is going to be an issue. And at first I no, but then I recalled earlier in the book, Lo is talking about Cohen and how Cohen took a vow of celibacy. A lot of the alphas of werewolf packs take vows of celibacy so they can focus on the pack. And that's what Cohen did, and now Serena's here, and now it's probably going to cause a mess. So we will see. I know Ali Hazelwood has talked about wanting to write a sequel for this book. I'm sure it'll focus on Cohen and Serena's relationship more than anything. But we'll find out. So that's it
Yeah,
is
that
very
was the whole
silly.
book.
Pretty
It
much. It's absolute breakneck speed. Um we didn't talk about a couple things, like the fact that the blood of species are different colors.
yeah, so humans are the regular red, vampires are purple, and werewolves are green. So when the werewolves like blush, Misery describes it like as their faces turning green, which is so silly.
Yeah. Like, you'd be like, "Are you sick? Are you okay? Do you need to sit down, have some water?" It's so silly. And I just think about all of like any of the scenes where she's like feeding off of him, she's covered in green instead of like the
Yeah,
regular
it's
red.
so I don't it's such a choice. And
It
I
was such a choice.
I'm guessing it's like a thing of like trying to like set these werewolves and vampires apart from like other iterations, but it is silly. Like you could have done something else, you know? I don't know.
Like, why green?
I'm guessing it's supposed to be like because they live in the forest. Don't know. It's I just it is very strange and like I don't know. I feel like she could have done something else to try and like set herself apart as far as like the way these magical races work, but
Mhm.
okay, I guess.
The thing is, I feel like she did though, because she made it to where like vampires and wares and humans are all biological. It's not somebody being turned or being bitten and made into one. It's all you're born that way. And so I was like, I feel like you set yourself apart enough because I've never seen anything like that in terms of vampire media or werewolf media. Um, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. Did you have to make their blood green? I feel like we had enough. Maybe so.
Real.
There's also the whole thing of like the vampires do age and they're not immortal.
Mhm.
Um, Funky stuff like that where it's definitely different from any kind of like regular vampire trope media, anything of the sort. Um, so that was interesting. I we didn't talk about some of the, like, the modern day slang or quotes. Um, I feel like we must mention before any wrapping up of anything, we must mention that Lo's first words to her was, "How the fuck do you smell like this?"
Yeah,
And my brain quite literally went, "Okay, Edward Cullen,
truly,
it's giving it's giving when Edward first smelled Bella in their little chemistry class."
that
And it
part.
made me laugh so hard. Um, where's the fucking other, icon of the show? Um, it's the bad bitches line. There it is. Basically at one point, Misery is being, like, watched 24/7 by the Wares while she's in their territory. Um, and she says, "Because we're all bad bitches till a scowling Ware stands outside the bathroom door while we're washing our hair." First and foremost, that rhymes, and I'm pissed about it because it just hit me that it rhymes. Ware and hair? Fuck you. Fuck you, Ali Hazelwood, for that. Not only did she use "because we're all bad bitches until," but she made it rhyme in the same sentence. And then on the very next page of that, she's talking about how, like, she tried to sneak in a phone and stuff like that. And she says, "Your Honor, I got caught." And I'm like, "You did not just
Jesus
say that
Christ.
to me."
There's also a point where she's talking about someone else and she goes like, "Oh no, we have fucking like a Moreland stand on our hands or something." And I was like, "I can't take this seriously, actually."
There's also a mention of Grand Theft Auto, specifically Grand Theft Auto. It's not just like, "Oh, you play specific auto with so and so." Absolute absolute bonkers. Insanity. What do you mean? You mean? Why is Grand Theft Auto there? Um, this book is so silly, and there's so much in it that we could talk about. There's so many little things, like Misery being terrible at sneaking around because her scent is so strong, it's gonna be
She
everywhere.
literally
And she's like,
oh my
"Yeah, no, I'm so
god.
sneaky."
That scene is so insane. She breaks into Lo's room to, like, look for, like, electronics or something, and she's, like, touching all of his shit. She's, like, touching the books on his bookshelf, she's pulling open his drawers. He's an architect, so he draws, and she finds, like, a drawing of herself and doesn't ever click that maybe he likes her, whatever. She's, like, touching his bedside table, like, all of this stuff, and later he basically is like, "Yeah, I know you broke into my room." And she's like, "Wait, how do you know?" And he's like, "You literally left your stink everywhere in my room."
Like, "Your scent is so strong, bitch. I could smell you a mile away. Of course I could smell you in my room." What? She's like, "Oh, yeah. Damn, you right." Okay. Um, Misery is so silly. She's so smart, and then she's so not smart. Um, there's also a mention of, where the fuck did it go? I believe there's a mention of furries as well. Um, at the on, like, the beginning of chapter 8, she's talking about how, like, she needs some tweezers for something, and she's like, "Do wares use them? As the original furries, do they find them morally repugnant?" And I'm like, "No fucking way
Yeah,
that there's furries in this
I
universe."
mean, we know that there are though because she also talks at one point her
Oh, like, furries in this universe?
Lo keeps insisting Lo keeps insisting to her that, like, they're not compatible biologically. And at one point she talks about that her and Serena have watched human-produced vampire werewolf porn. So, like, I'm not surprised
Forget
about the furries.
How did I forget about that? Oh my god, I forgot about the porn thing. And when the porn thing comes up, she's like, "There's no way that a werewolf, like, would get stuck in somebody like that." Yes, they do, babe. You just know it yet, but you'll find out. You'll find out later.
So
Sends me.
it's so silly. I just listen. So the reason I give this book a 3.5, I think it is what it says on the can. It's silly. It's a quick read. I do have some problems with some of like the plot stuff. Again, the thing with Lo and that whole scene like already takes like a point at least off for me. I really hate that trope and it felt very unnecessary in this book. Um the writing could be slowed down a little bit in some parts. I wish we had seen more of Owen. I wish we had seen more of Serena. Sometimes Misery is infuriating and sometimes she's like a great protagonist. Um
Yeah.
but like the book is what it says on the tin. Is what it comes down to basically. It's not life-changing. It's not like, whatever, but it's fun, it's silly. It's got werewolves and vampires. I think it falls a little bit into very tropey territory like a lot of contemporary romance does nowadays, where it's like enemies to lovers, marriage of convenience, blah blah blah. But aside from that, it's fine. It was silly. It was a good time for me, you know.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it as well. It's very much exactly what you're asked. It's exactly what it says on the cover. You don't need to think too hard. You, there's nothing surprising here. It's just silly and goofy. I absolutely do have like questions about like some things in it of like, you know, with the halfling thing, is it just humans and wares or can vampires and wares do it? Or like things of that nature, just random like questions that I feel like could have been answered if it was slowed down a little bit. Um, I feel like maybe Ali Hazelwood tried to bite off a little bit more than she could chew in terms of like her idea of how long she wanted it to be. Um, I feel like if she wanted to do everything that is mentioned in this book, it did have to be longer. Um, Reason I give it 3.5 is heavily agree. That little fucking tropey, I'm gonna hurt you to push you away and keep you safe. Hate that trope. I hate it every time it comes up. I don't like miscommunication like that. Um, and especially the fact that it genuinely had no consequences. It kind of happened for no reason, it feels. Um, like even if he knew about Owen's plan of like he knew this thing was gonna happen, um he could have just been like, "Hey, I'm gonna see you later. Like, I'll see you back at the house.
I mean,
Mick is gonna come pick you up."
it's so crazy because like typically that trope is used because of like a safety issue, but most of why he does it is because he thinks that it will be too much of a burden on her, his
Mhm.
feelings about it. And so it really does have no consequence because we as the reader know she likes him. So it feels very like
Yeah.
it's so strange.
Yeah, and she makes it very apparent that she likes him. I feel, especially before that, she's like, "No, I know it's me. It's fine. I'm happy. I just tell me that I'm right. Like, confirm for me that it's me." And he's like, "No, actually, wrong." But she's not wrong. She's not. And he just silly dumb man brain.
Yeah, I that whole portion was like if anything I would change about this book, it would be to take that out and do something else for the conflict because it felt unnecessary and annoying and I didn't care for
Yeah.
it at all.
Yeah, it felt like incredibly out of character for him. Like he's got some grump to him. He's a little grumpy sometimes, but like never to that degree. And it's I wouldn't even call it grumpy. I would more call it he's just all business, take care of shit, do what he needs to do. Like very little fun and play. It's he's a leader and he's going to be a leader. Um but that felt so like left field for him. 'cause he doesn't seem like the type who would hurt somebody like that. He doesn't feel like the type who would say, "I enjoyed fucking you, but you've got the wrong idea." He's not the kind of guy who would say that. So it felt very like, "That's not my man, actually. Who's this guy? I've never seen him before." But he sure did it. And because he did that, he lost a point from me. Um, but yeah, it's just the little bits of like pacing wise, the issues there. It's far too fast for what's in it. And she could have explained some stuff more if it was longer. But other than that, it's a good little time. It's nothing big or new or crazy. Nothing like incredibly emotionally investing. Like I cared about these characters and like all that, but it probably won't stick with me. Excuse me. It probably won't stick with me for very long. It's just one of those books that's like, yeah, I read that. It was funny. Haha. And then move on with your day. It's not one of those books that'll stay in your mind forever. Which I feel is to be expected for like a little contemporary paranormal vampire werewolf romance. It's meant for a good time, not a long time. And that's what you get. That's what you get, and that's all you really need, to be so honest. But all in all, good time. Good little time. I don't know if I would ever pick up another Ali Hazelwood book. I don't know unless she decided she wanted to do more paranormal romance like this. I don't know if maybe the contemporary, like real world, no magic, no fantasy thing is for me. Um, but I do respect it. I respect her grind, respect her work. She's doing what she needs to do, and I love that for her.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't read her other books either. I just am not a huge fan of contemporary romance. With like nothing else in it. It needs to have some pizzazz, some flavor, you know?
Mhm.
Um,
A little extra something something.
yeah, but like it was fine. It was good for what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if she ever made a sequel to this, I would probably pick it up just to
Yeah,
see where it goes. I
same.
wouldn't mind. Also, another opportunity to see Owen, I'll take it.
Literally that part.
Owen's the star of the show here.
Exactly. Um,
Him and Liana, star of the show.
real. Okay. Yeah. That's it for this one. Next month we're reading Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. Um,
Mhm.
which is a YA post-apocalyptic kind of a book. So yeah, you can look forward to that. But that's it, I think, for
Mhm.
this one, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I think I'm all good and all done. So we will see you guys on the next full moon.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye.